Javonte Williams' new deal may make Tyler Allgeier more affordable, but probably not for the Atlanta Falcons.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in the Northern Hemisphere. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you don't know me, I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Atlanta Falcons for 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP. Still going strong here on Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. And on today's daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, we're going to have both a football conversation and a non-football conversation. The football one, we'll be talking about Javonte Williams' extension in Dallas and how that impacts Tyler Allgeier's market. Will it allow him to take a 1-year prove-it deal and potentially bring him back to Atlanta? And then when we talk non-football, we will talk about the tragic passing of former Falcons wide receiver Rondale Moore. It's going to be a heavy discussion, but I think ultimately it will be a necessary one later in the episode. But let's start off talking football here on this football podcast. Javonte Williams, if you missed the news over the weekend, signed a 3-year, $24 million extension with the Dallas Cowboys. He was an impending free agent coming off a 1,200-yard season with the Cowboys, and that number at $8 million per year is slightly higher than some of the websites that I've seen projecting his contract, where PFF actually projected him to sign a 3-year, $23 million deal, so slightly more than that one. The Athletic, I think, had him at 3 years, $18.5 million. And so we'll ultimately see, if that's that number is closer if we're counting new money and whatnot, but or all of it's new money since he didn't have a contract. So that doesn't make any sense. But, I think that figure for Williams is probably the upper limit of the projections for Tyler Allgeier. We talked about this, I believe, last week, or we projected Allgeier's contract to be in that $5 to $8 million year range. And there was a possibility for it to go more, but I think, it's going to be harder for, Allgeier to get more than Javonte Williams on the open market, just because, they're both sort of similar physical running backs, but Williams is obviously coming off a 1,200-yard season, while Allgeier is coming off like a 400 or 500-yard season and whatnot. And so when you look at those websites like The Athletic and PFF and their projections for Allgeier, Athletic has him at a 1-year, $5.25 million deal. Pro Football Focus has him at 2 years, $10 million, so $5 million per year. And it's notable to me that Williams signed a 1-year prove-it deal with the Cowboys worth $3 million. And I imagine, Allgeier could be looking to sign a similar sort of 1-year prove-it deal in the similar range that the Athletic is projecting at that $5 million range, with the idea that if he can prove that he can be a 1,000-yard rusher, then he could make a similar contract as Williams after he proves it a year from now. Najee Harris signed a similar 1-year, $5 million deal with the Chargers. Obviously was not able to prove it due to a season-ending injury early in the season. Rico Dowdle signed a similar 1-year prove-it deal for less than what Williams, I think it was 1 year, 2.75, to be the RB2 in Carolina. Obviously was their leading rusher, 1,000 yards, and he's looking to cash in this offseason. And so I think when you think about it at face value, it's like, oh, could we get Allgeier on a 1-year prove-it deal? If we went and offered him a 1-year, $5 million deal, that would make him more affordable and more plausible. I think at face value, that makes sense. But the minute you think about it a little bit more, then sort of face value, you go a layer deeper. It's like, well, if he's signing a prove-it deal, how is he going to prove it in Atlanta, right? How is he going to get 1,000 yards or 1,200 yards in Atlanta like a Dowdle, like a Javonte Williams, if he's the RB2 behind Bijan Robinson? And, that's really going to be the challenge. And so, it wouldn't shock me if the number that Tyler Allgeier ultimately signs for is an affordable number for a team like Atlanta on a 1-year sort of prove it deal. But because of that aspect of getting the opportunity to get 200, 250 potential carries this season in order to land a much more lucrative long-term deal will be virtually impossible here in Atlanta. I don't see the Falcons being able to even afford Allgeier even at a discount rate this offseason. So I think that challenge is still going to be the biggest challenge. Now, if Allgeier doesn't get those offers out there, if everybody's offering him an RB2 opportunity elsewhere, then maybe that's the world where the Falcons can maybe re-sign him and he'd just be content staying the RB2 here in Atlanta as opposed to going somewhere else and being the RB2 there. But given the expectation, and we'll see how it all plays out, that someone is going to offer him an opportunity, even if it's not, set and etched in stone to be the RB1 somewhere, but someone's going to give him that opportunity to earn that spot, in a similar way of Javonte Williams or Rico Dowdle last offseason. The expectation is that Allgeier is going to be gone. So we will see on that front as we approach free agency. But now we will get into the heavy stuff and have a conversation about mental health and suicide, given the tragic passing of former Falcon wide receiver Rondale Moore. And we'll do that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So wouldn't it be nice if doing your taxes was as easy as handing the ball off to Bijan Robinson? With TurboTax full service, it is now you can hand off your taxes to a local expert and not have to stress from start to finish. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out your forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They're going to handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every deduction. All you got to do is upload your documents, go about the rest of your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, and it's going to give you real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it, just like you get that peace of mind every time you watch Bijan Robinson play football. For a limited time, get your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. And if you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, you now can, because FanDuel is going to give you your chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flight tickets and a whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking, well, which team do I think can make a deep run? It's the perfect time now to lock in your pick. And we love features this time of year, especially coming off the All-Star break. Who's going to make that conference title or championship run? It's going to add an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can your pick win you cash, it can also send you to the NBA Finals. So visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So in case you missed the other news over the weekend, former Falcons wide receiver, former Arizona Cardinals wide receiver, and former Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Rondale Moore was found dead on Saturday from a suspected self-inflicted gunshot wound. For those of you that don't know, Moore did spend some time here in Atlanta in 2024, an offseason pickup. He was traded from Arizona in exchange for Desmond Ridder, coming in to compete for the wide receiver 3 spot. That spot ultimately went to Ray McCloud, and that pushed Moore on the roster bubble that summer. And then he suffered a season-ending injury during joint practice with the Miami Dolphins. After the season, he's left the Falcons, signed with the Minnesota Vikings as a free agent, but then suffered another season-ending injury this past summer. And in light of these recent events involving Moore's tragic passing, you can't help but think about some of the criticisms I used to say about Rondale Moore back in 2024 about him as a player and whether or not that could have contributed to the decision for him to take his life. I doubt it did, but you just can't help but wonder about those things. But these events, more importantly, shine a light on the need for mental health in ways that we can improve mental health, especially with the NFL and the sort of complicating factors that involve CTE. A Harvard study came out just last month that showed from 2011 to 2019 that there was an increased rate of suicide amongst NFL players compared to other major sports like Major League Baseball and the NBA. There was also a study that came out a couple of years ago that said a third of ex-NFL players believe that their post-career playing career health issues were related to CTE. And that specific group was 5 times more likely to entertain suicidal thoughts than the other groups of players that were asked that question. And so that's the scary link between what the data and the correlation between CTE and potential suicide. And we know that there's a relatively high rate of occurrence in CTE in former NFL players, that when their brains are examined after their death, we find a very high rate of that. And so that is a scary, scary proposition. And so I'll finish today's episode sharing a personal story about my relationship with suicidal thoughts, right? And I want to share this just because I have a mostly male audience. Over 90% of my audience is male, and we are taught from an early age to sort of be enduring and unshakable and sturdy as a rock. But we are not rocks. We are human beings. And eventually, when you try to be as sturdy as a rock, the rock eventually gives way. And that can lead to people taking their own lives. And my own journey through that was many, many years ago when I was in my mid-20s. I was living on my own for the first time. I was going through some personal things and feeling pretty worthless at the time, and had a lot of sort of suicidal ideation at that point in time. And, me being a classic overthinker, this is probably the one legit time where, overthinking things was actually a benefit to me. But I remember thinking quite a bit about that and thinking about how it would impact my loved ones. And I had a frank and honest conversation with my parents about it. And sort of the conclusion that even though, ending my life might, in my suffering, at least in my head, it would only bring more suffering onto those people that I love. And, I know not everybody has 2 loving parents. I know not everyone is immediately surrounded by loved ones, friends, and family. But if you are, please reach out to them if you are going through similar issues and thinking about ending your life. If you don't have those people, I know you feel very isolated, but there are resources out there. There are hotlines available for you to seek the support that I think you need. It is not a sign of weakness if you need help. It is the bravest, it is the strongest thing that you can do as a human being, as a man. When we talk about masculinity, so much of masculinity is wrapped up in agency, sort of making your mark on the world. And you don't make your mark on the world by dying. You only can do that by living. So it's unfortunate that we're having this conversation. It's unfortunate what happened to Rondale Moore. But if there is any silver lining to it, maybe this will allow more people to seek the help that they need. And maybe we save a few more lives. So if you or someone is struggling or in crisis, help is available. If you can, please call or text 988 or chat at 988lifeline.org for free confident support. So that's going to leave it here on today's episode. Tomorrow we'll get back to football. We'll talk about a Jason La Canfora report about the Falcons moving on from Michael Penix and whether or not that's a possibility this offseason. So we'll get back into the ongoing conversation about, the Falcons quarterback plans, as we have been discussing probably ad nauseum to, I'm sure, many of your guys' thoughts over the last few weeks. But that's in store for you on the next Locked On Falcons. Please continue to make us your first listen on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out Locked On NFL, as well as Locked On NFL Draft, Locked On NFL Scouting, to get you guys geared up for this week's combine action in Indianapolis. And since there is no offseason for the everydayers, check out the Everydayer Club. You get an ad-free version of Locked On Falcons. You get exclusive Discord access and so much more. You can find links to that and how you can join the Everydayer Club in the link in the description below at lockedonfalcons.supercast.com. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.